Okay, Chair, we are now live.
Perfect. So I'd just like to call this meeting to order at 5:05 p.m. And I would just like to begin by reading the land acknowledgement. So the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So as it's a virtual meeting, I will just have to we'll just begin with roll call. So I just ask that each member turn on their camera and test their audio once they are called upon. So we'll start with Zoya.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Okay.
Thank you, Zoya. And we see you. Perfect. So next is Abraham.
Hi, hello, I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abraham.
Welcome.
And Jane. We're expecting her to join a bit later. Next is Carter.
Hello.
Wonderful. Nice to see you. Next is James. Thank you. And then Crystal. Perfect. So now we're just going to go on to the approval of the minutes. So are there any changes the committee would like to make on the minutes? If not, then I'll call for a motion to approve the minutes. This will require a mover and a seconder.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Perfect. And who was that moved? Sorry.
Carter.
Carter. Perfect. Thank you. Go. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand. Perfect. All those in favor say nay. Perfect. So the motion passed, the motion carries. So are there any requests for additions, deletions, or changes to the order of business?
Yes, Chair, there is one deletion coming forward from the clerk's office, and that's for item 9.2.2, the brunch with the mayor debrief. And then you would have to approve the agenda as amended.
Perfect. So we will be deleting the, we will be having now a vote to delete the 9.2.2. So we're just going to move for that the agenda be approved as amended. This will require a mover and seconder.
I'll move.
Perfect. And do we have a seconder?
I can second.
Perfect. Thank you. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Perfect. All those in favor, all those against say nay. Perfect. The motion carries. So are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Perfect. So next on our agenda is the work plan approval. So now I'll just have Lama actually speak to the 2023 draft work plan that was circulated to the members last week.
So the committee worked on their brainstorming for the work plan at the last 3 meetings. It is generally the same as their 2022 work plan, with the addition of priority 1 being supporting youth well-being, which with an emphasis on physical and social supports and resources for youth, and that will cover mental health supports and resources, social and safe spaces for youth, newcomer youth supports, and youth self-reliance. Priority 2 is climate action with a focus on Halifax, and then priority 3 is youth perspectives and engagement on municipal elections and HRM social policies. The committee did identify their community organizations that they would like to hear from, as well as HRM's business units, and that was all outlined in the handout that was circulated to the committee. And that is everything from me, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lama. So are there any changes that anyone would like to make to the work plan, or would anyone have any clarifying questions for Lama? Perfect. So if there are none, then we'll proceed with the following motion that the 2023 work plan for the Youth Advisory Committee be approved and forwarded to the Executive Standing Committee. So this will require a mover and a seconder.
I'll move.
Perfect. Thank you, Zoya. And we'll need a seconder.
I'll second.
Perfect. Thank you, Abraham. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you.
So if there is no further discussion on the work plan, so then I will call for the question. All those in favor say aye or raise hands. Perfect. All those who oppose? Perfect. So the motion carries. So Lama, is there any correspondence that has been received by the clerk's office?
There was no correspondence received by the clerk's office, Chair.
Perfect. And are there any petitions that have been received by the clerk's office?
There were no petitions received by the clerk's office as well.
Perfect. So next on our agenda, is it correct? Will Becky be going first for the presentation?
That is correct.
Perfect. So next on our agenda is the mobile youth support team. So I'll ask that Becky Kerr, youth counselor, to speak on this item, and Becky will be exactly. So go ahead, Becky. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cyril.
No worries.
So hello, everyone. My name is Becky. I am the youth counselor with the Mobile Youth Support Team, which is part of Halifax Regional Municipality's new program that comes from funding with the Builder Safer Communities Fund through a federal grant. So we are working in conjunction with that grant and the municipality's public safety office to look at how we can support youth in our community with the overall goal of reducing gun and gang violence in our communities. So I'm just going to share the website here that you can find all of our information on. So this is our website on the Halifax Regional Municipality's overall website. If you type into Google Mobile Youth Support Team, you'll find us here. So our team is comprised of 2 positions right now. So there is myself. Just to confirm, everybody can see this, right? Okay. I don't use Zoom a ton, so I just want to make sure I'm not talking without it. So the positions are myself, the youth counselor, and then a youth outreach worker who we will have joining us in the next few weeks. What our roles are to provide brief intervention services to youth across the community. So we can serve youth between the ages of 13 and 24. With brief intervention services, which is what we consider to be outreach support, drop-in support, or one-on-one brief counseling, which for us is generalized counseling. So if there's a person who's looking for specific counseling, a specialty, or something to deal with a very significant mental health concern, then our youth outreach worker would look at referring them to services that we have in our community, helping them get connected. But if somebody's just looking to sort of touch base with somebody, have someone to chat to, then we can look at supporting them typically through up to 3 sessions, where in those 3 sessions, we try to identify what it is that they may be looking for, what it is that you want to kind of focus on, and then try to support them in getting a referral for long-term supports in that specific area. So on our website, you can find kind of what we do specifically. So the youth outreach worker, as I mentioned, provides short-term outreach support through drop-in and scheduled appointments, and helps with external resources with a focus on mental health, legal, recreation, education, and employment supports. So they can offer peer support and peer support training to youth. They can offer court support to youth and their families navigating the court system for the first time. And they work closely with stakeholders to identify existing resources to ensure youth are being connected with the appropriate supports within their community. So one that is very unique to us is the helping families navigate the court system for the first time. So if there are youth who are being charged for the first time and don't know how to access legal aid services, don't know who to connect to in terms of if they're seeking maybe an African Nova Scotian support worker, an Indigenous support worker to help them through those processes, then we can work with them in helping them connect to all of those different supports that exist within the courts, but also then attend some of those initial court appearances with folks so that they feel safe and understand what's happening in that room. So those are some different things that are unique to our outreach worker. And then they can also, help with employment support. If you're looking to connect with different agencies in the community or services in the community, but you don't quite know where to start, you can connect with our youth outreach worker. And then for myself, we offer, as I mentioned, drop-in and by appointment brief intervention services. So the goal is to support youth in identifying key challenges in their lives and taking the initial steps to address and make positive changes while working with youth to transition into long-term external supports in the community. And so in addition to that, I offer group program opportunities, including anger management, healthy relationships, and grief and peer support. And also offer regular drop-in opportunities within HRM facilities and one-on-one scheduled appointments within HRM facilities. So as some of you may know, there are multi-service youth centers in HRM, so the Den being one of them. And then we are in the process of opening up the new space in Spryfield. So part of what I'll be doing and what the youth outreach worker will be doing will be offering consistent supports at the Spryfield Center, whatever they choose to call that, on a regular basis, so that if youth want to drop into that space and have access to a counselor or an outreach worker, they'll have that consistently. And then that the hope is when the next multi-service youth center opens, that we'll be able to transition community supports into that space to do the same work, and that we can then transition to the next multi-service youth space to make sure that they have those same supports available to them. So hopefully in North Preston, and I believe there's one other space that is on the kind of top list of where those multi-service youth centers are going to be. But we'll also be making sure that we're in each community on a regular basis. So for instance, this evening I'm at George Dixon Community Center, and if there's any youth who are attending their drop-in programs, they're welcome to come drop by with me and have, private one-on-one conversations, or just hang out if that's what they'd like. So the only other things in addition to that we do are we also offer community crisis response. So we do offer debrief opportunities within local rec centers when crisis occurs in a community and youth are impacted. And we can also come when appropriate to other locations outside of rec centers like schools, churches, community centers, to participate in debriefing and supportive conversations for youth in the community. So for instance, if there is an incident in a community, whether that is weapons related, a crime is committed, or maybe there's just something that has really impacted a lot of youth, then we're able to come in and create a space in that local rec center and set up sort of a mobile crisis response situation, so that if youth want to come and debrief and want to come and have a conversation, that there's a safe space to do that. And so that's also an option, and people can reach out directly to our email and phone number that are attached to the website if that's something that they're looking for. So that's sort of what I do and what our team does. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. I'd be happy to answer if so. But yeah.
I had a question about the mobile, like the mobile crisis response aspect of it. Would that have been something that would have been implemented during the forest fires in Hammonds Plains, or would that be something that I know the province took over a lot of that? So would that have been something that came up?
So that was something that I had reached out to express our ability for. We weren't brought into that situation as of now. I think because the province had taken on sort of the lead role in it, but we have made it clear that if there is at any point in time now that folks are starting to transition back into normal life, for a lot of these folks, whatever that looks like now, that we are available to mobilize whenever necessary. So, if people start to sort of transition back into their communities and need that, that we're still available. But for sure, that's exactly what it would be is when that incident happened, we immediately reached out and said, we are here. what do you need from us? We'd be happy to help. And for instance, there, if there's a group of folks who are also going to be going into some of those spaces through not necessarily the adults, but if there were, I don't know if you could actually be on search and rescue at 24. I'm not really sure, but anything like that, if there were folks who wanted to debrief, they'd have free access to it as well.
Becky, can you also give the example of what we did at CPA?
Yeah, for sure. So as a lot of people are probably aware, at CPA high school, there was an incident involving a stabbing that happened there. So we recognized that there were a lot of youth who were probably impacted from that incident. So we had reached out to the school, and we worked with the school to offer 2 full days of drop-in services at the rec center that's attached to the school. And we brought pizza and hung out with like a bunch of different stuff in a rec space there, and saw about, I think it was close to 100 youth both days. Coming in around lunchtime, we were like slinging pizza like it was going out of style, and had quite a few youth asking who we were and what kind of services we could offer. So just being there as a reminder that if anybody needed anything, that we could. And so definitely, if there's anything that happens in a community, we will reach out, but someone can also reach out to us if it's something that maybe hasn't been as publicized and we aren't aware of it. Someone can reach out, and if it's considered a crisis in the community of youth, then we take that seriously, like whatever that is, and we'll support it.
Did you find that's cool? Actually, I didn't know that you went out to CPA for 2 days. Did you find that there was like any uptick in terms of people accessing your services after the CPA incident, like after those 2 days at CPA?
I wouldn't say specifically for like from that. I think what that mostly did was identify that we exist for the youth. So we didn't have anybody specifically reach out after the fact, but we did have youth who chatted with us while they were there for lunch and who had some conversations. I think part of that was because we were brought in a week after, and the school had done a really great job mobilizing like the week that it happened. So we had kind of come in the following week, and everyone had been talking about it now for a full week. And so our hope is that as people become more aware of the mobile youth support team, that they will be bringing us in when incidents happen and not waiting, a week or 2 weeks, because it makes it harder for folks, because they've been talking about it amongst their peers and like kind of trying to debrief with it themselves for so long. And so I think one learning thing that came out of that for us was definitely that mobilization needs to happen. Like those debrief like availabilities need to happen almost instantly. They can't wait a week or two, because with social media and everything else, like everyone's talking about it for right away. And so we need to be there to offer that support right away as well.
Cool. But yeah, I know that the awareness thing is also a huge aspect of it. So at least you were able to sort of get there. And I'm sure that a lot of people heard about your services and maybe hadn't heard about it before.
Yeah. So we only launched in January, so we're still very new, and we just got our website up and running, and just got our promotional material. I think it was like last week. So our hope is to do a full launch in the fall when all of the schools go back in. But for now, we're just doing things like this and trying to get the awareness out there to as many people as we can. So definitely feel free to tell everyone to look up the mobile youth support team and reach out to us whenever you feel like you have something. This summer, we'll also be going around the community with an outdoor space. So we'll have a little gazebo, we have some beanbag chairs, we have a Bluetooth speaker, and we'll have promotional material. And we're going to be at beaches, community centers, parks, just trying to promote who we are, so that when September comes and folks are going back into school and things are starting to happen, that people know where to find us and who we are. So for anyone who might be aware of an event that's happening where there'll be a lot of youth, or a space that would be a good idea to check out this summer, like please let us know, because we're trying to get to as many like youth focused spaces as possible, so that not only do service providers know who we are, but youth actually know who we are. So perfect. Well, thanks everybody for letting me chat with you this evening. If anybody has any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out to me or to the Halifax Youth email address, and that goes to Becca, and then Becca just passes it on to me as well. So feel free to reach out to me directly or to that email account.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Have a good night.
So thank you, Becky, again. And just so next on our agenda is we have a presentation from Parks and Recreation. So I'll next ask Stephen Cushing. Is it Cushing?
Cushing. Yep.
Cushing. Okay, perfect. So, and he's a landscape architect, and he's going to give a presentation on the park lighting strategy. So the floor is yours, Stephen. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Cyril. All righty. You can see that screen, can you? Oops, there we go. Thanks. As mentioned, my name is Stephen Cushing, landscape architect. I work in the policy and planning division of Parks and Rec. And we've been tasked to draft this park lighting strategy. So we thought it would be a really good time to come to you as a committee to kind of gain your insights and ideas, an idea of your lived experiences, how you use parks, how you want to use parks, how lighting might improve your ability to use parks. So to give you an idea of where this project is coming from, this project comes from a motion from Deputy Mayor Austin, where he asked us to look at what it would take to draft a strategy. So looking at, do we need policy changes to allow people to go into parks at nighttime to use them? How would we pick which parks need lighting and which ones don't, and look at how we would fund the installation of lighting in parks. So last summer we went back to regional council and said, yes, this is something that we could draft in-house. We see it being approached through a few different lenses. So walkways that go through parks, park facilities, and decorative placemaking lighting, which I'll get into in a minute. Just to give you some background, we have more than 900 parks within the municipality. That's over, the urban, suburban, rural kind of cross section. So Ecum, Secum to Hubbards. It's not really reasonable that we would look at each individual park and put lighting in all of them. There's probably only a couple hundred that are actively used on a daily basis. So we know that parks are used for a lot of active recreation purposes, but they also operate as, excuse me, as a major social realm within communities, and they're the main travel routes that people use to get from home to work and to school and to social activities, whatever. So regional council raised a number of different issues both times when we were at council, looking at unsafe behavior in parks, how we're going to prioritize one park over another, how we could potentially change our parks bylaw to actually permit the use of parks, especially if you're walking through a park. If a park closes at 10 p.m., which they generally are between 10 and 5 a.m., can we look at a way that we could allow people to be in parks if they're traveling through? And we really don't have a formal process right now to consider lighting in parks. It's really where we might be working on a project where there might be money or where a light is burnt out and we happen to replace it. So this strategy is hoping to kind of streamline that process. So these are the three different areas, the lenses that that I was mentioning earlier that we'd like to focus on in the strategy. So the first being the pathways in parks, with a focus on what are the main travel routes, what are the main community connectors that we know that people need to take to get from point A to point B, especially if you're not driving, you don't want to drive, you can't drive, or if the pathway is a more direct route, to school, work, retail, appointments, anything like that. And then there's also multi-use pathways in parks, so that active transportation element where people are actually commuting. Then there's park facilities, which could be anything from a gazebo in a park where you want to hang out. It could be a tourism related structure. It could be washrooms, any other buildings. It could be sport courts, basketball, tennis, anything like that. And then there's the placemaking and decorative elements. So those are, the social places you want to hang out in the evening. It could be, string lighting or anything else that would really contribute to a social space, fountain lighting, public art lighting, extra interest in the city. Just to give you an idea of who we're talking to, there's a number of different units within HRM that really have a stake in, even if they're not in parks and recreation, but, play a role, looking at talking to our colleagues in diversity and inclusion, public safety office, active transportation, facility design and construction, which is, looking the groups that would build washrooms or community facilities, environment and climate change to make sure we're doing things in a sustainable and responsible way. And then some external folks like business improvement districts who roll out lighting projects across downtowns and communities, Build Nova Scotia, what they're doing on the waterfront, our partners at schools, HRCE, because we know pathways to schools aren't always lit, and in the shoulder seasons when people are students are leaving school in the wintertime after practice or meetings or whatever, it can be dark and it can be scary. RCMP and HRP for that safety and enforcement piece, and also the public. We have a public engagement program that's live now, which I'll talk about in a second. So really, that's kind of the high level of what I wanted to introduce to you, and the agenda. I wanted it to be fairly flexible, fairly informal, because we already have a motion of regional council. We don't necessarily need a recommendation or motion to go on to executive standing committee or regional council. We just want to know, how can lighting influence the look, feel, and experience of a park after dark? So I do have a couple of questions that I'll throw up on the screen, but I'll come back to that. I just wanted to show you that we do have a Shape Your City engagement program that's underway now. So, feel free to play around with that, share it if on your socials, if that's something that you do. It does close this coming Sunday on the 18th. But definitely this conversation with the committee or anyone else who wants to comment on it, I have my email here on the bottom. We can always continue that. We're not limited by that survey end date, whether there's comments, questions, or if we want to have further conversations. So we're going to continue, well into the summer, continue to meet with some of our stakeholders. We're going to look at what it means if we do need to change a parks bylaw. As I was mentioning, parks generally close between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. If you do need to walk on a lighted path through a park, getting those written changes into the parks bylaw will be important. And then we'd like to wrap everything up by early 2024 and bring a presentation back to regional council. So I think this youth lens is really important for how we're going to frame this, because I think that broad-based community engagement we do generally doesn't have that youth voice, and I know that your experiences are might be unique, and they are unique for how you use space. Some of the questions that I had in mind, we don't have to go through all of them. We also don't have to do this as a traditional Q&A. If you want to just throw out a comment, that's completely appropriate. Or if you just want to, send me an email later, that's also appropriate. But some of the things we wanted to kind of hit on are, is safety something that you do consider when you use a park in the evening hours? And would lighting contribute to your feelings of safety within a park space? If you do think about lighting, how should that look and how should that feel in a park space? Are there things you want to do at night but you can't because of a lack of lighting or poor lighting? Do you have in your mind or your experiences, lighting that is really good or lighting that's really bad? Because we have lots of both around the municipality. And how should we really weigh one project over another? That prioritization will be something that we really want to get into in this strategy. So that's kind of really the crux of what I wanted to get at. I don't know, we could throw it over to you. We could have some back and forth. If you like, I might leave that up on the screen if we want to do that.
You can go ahead, Carter.
Okay, I just wanted to mention about like light pollution because
Mhm.
even though it's like a big city, like there's no getting away from it. But it is a topic to consider like when you're enjoying like those outdoor spaces because you want to look up. It's also like an environmental thing, which especially impacts youth because we're here longer. So I
Mhm.
would suggest, like, especially with pathways, when you're walking like to and from on those parks, like motion censored lights. That way, when a light doesn't have to be there, it's not there.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's something that we really want to sit down with our environment and climate change folks on. What are the best approaches for reducing pollution, reducing our energy consumption. We have lots of great examples that we can pull from where the fixtures that you use are all downward facing or mostly downward facing. So in the past, we may have just been flooding everything because that's what we thought might make it safer, when in reality, that doesn't really make a safe space. And so if we can direct light downward and only light, say, the path of travel, um, that can certainly help. And then things like dimming lights, say after midnight, when we know that there aren't as many users out, but you still want a safe travel route, those kind of things could help. Or identifying, areas that we don't want to light at all, especially if it's like a sensitive wilderness area, or, if there's, we don't want to, flood someone's window if there's an adjacent home, or, something like that. So yeah, I'll definitely take those comments back and really dig into that.
In terms of question number one, I know
Mhm.
I have some friends who like they're females and they will essentially like not walk in a park at night
Yeah.
if there's no light. I was
Mhm.
just curious, is there any research or studies on whether adding lights actually makes a park safer, or is it more like a psychological comfort?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there's lots of competing research out there that one says it does, one says it doesn't. But I think the consensus that we're finding is lighting doesn't necessarily make spaces safer, but what it does is it encourages more people to use it, and the more people that will use a space, that makes the space safer. So you have more people who take ownership, more people that can see other people, and so that's really kind of the basis of it. Um,
I'd like to expand
we're
my like personal experiences with that.
mhm,
So with light, it's not necessarily like affected because like I identify as a trans man, but I'm very often perceived as a woman, right? And the only time I'm ever really like fearing for safety is usually when like a man will approach me and talk to me.
mhm,
And then I'm like a little concerned, like
mhm,
especially at night. But usually like the darkness, it's not something I'm worried about, right?
yeah,
So I would think like in those situations I'm more concerned about what like the police system would do
mhm,
versus like what the environment looks like.
mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And we haven't sat down with our HRP, our CMP partners, but those are definitely the items we want to hit on. We're also we've been having a lot of back and forth and some actual exercises with the Public Safety Office and Diversity and Inclusion, who are helping us not only evaluate lighting, but space, and getting a wide cross section of our population to help evaluate space in general. So the women's safety assessment, not just for women, but gender diverse, racialized folks, everyone who is traditionally left out of the planning process, to all come together and evaluate space. And so they've been going around the municipality. I think so far it's mainly from councillors' motions, but really evaluating everything about a space and try to come up with a real holistic planning approach, where lighting is one part of it. But there's, like you said, there's an enforcement piece that maybe isn't ideal. There's the lighting piece, which maybe isn't ideal, and trying to get, make spaces more comfortable for everybody and accessible. Yeah.
For the lighting, would it be solar based and hydro based? And if not, would that be affecting the environment because of the emissions in the air and like
Mm,
good. How is it being done?
yeah. Yeah, that's something we're still exploring. So traditionally, what it is really we would have a power source from Nova Scotia Power, which is really just from the main grid, which is natural gas or coal. Not the most efficient forms of energy, but we're exploring piloting some solar lighting, whether it's a panel on a building that has a connection to a light fixture, or maybe it's a fixture that has a panel on the top of it. So we'd like to kind of look at different options and costing them out as well. So lighting is really expensive in general. One light pole with a fixture on top can be $15,000 to $20,000, just that. So by the time you look at underground wiring and conduit and all that kind of stuff, one lighting one path in a park could be $250,000 to $500,000. So, we're looking at, like, maybe it is cheaper to do solar, or maybe it's more expensive up front, but then we're saving on our energy later on. There's definitely efficiencies, so we're not tapping into the grid. So it's for the most part, it is tapping into the grid and traditional energy sources. Yeah.
Around how many parks are we looking at having the light at? Like, is there a rough estimate?
Yeah, we don't know for sure just yet. It's definitely not the 900 that number that I had said. We've kind of been, waiting to hear waiting to see what we hear from the public. What are people's priorities? Because in that survey that I mentioned, we want people to tell us about the parks that are on their minds, the ones they use frequently, not only to get to and from, but the ones you want to hang out in as well. So it's probably in a 1 to 200 kind of range, but they're all different situations and all different kind of lighting needs. So a neat thing in the survey that we're doing is there's two tabs. If you go in there, one of the tabs is a mapping component where you can actually drop a pin in a park, and you can say, you know what, this lighting is really bad, or I want to walk here, but I don't feel safe to do it because there's no lighting, or there's a basketball court that I really want to use, and it's close to all these other things. This would make sense to have some lighting, so that'll really kind of help us from a spatial component figure out what does the public prioritize. But that's only one part of it. We're looking at 311 calls, we're looking at crime data, we're looking at just looking at pathways in particular that connect communities from our own kind of mapping analysis. So there's going to be a few different kind of layers that go into figuring out, how many parks that we might be looking at.
For question number 5, in terms of looking at which parks you would look at, or the program would look to prioritize, is a lot of that going to be based on the results of the survey, or would you complement it with any other sort of data you might have?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be exclusively based on their survey. That's a good point. We want to make sure that from a safety perspective, we're creating environments that are safe for people. So, I mean, if there's a situation where we know there's a lot of demand based on, what the counselors are hearing, what we're hearing from 311, if a situation is unsafe and it's well used, something like that might, rise to the surface. We also are trying to bring in, an equitable lens. And so sometimes we don't hear from communities that would really benefit from lighting. And so we're trying to, build that relationship with, public safety office and diversity and inclusion to make sure that, if there's housing that's connected to transit, that should be a priority as well. So it's going to be multi-layered, but we want to be as transparent as possible. And so when we do this, what we heard survey, or what we heard report from the survey, and we bring the strategy with mapping data and all these things that we want to be very clear in how we're making our recommendations.
Yeah, for sure. Just because I remember when you first started talking about it, I was thinking, could one thing be just look at police reports almost and say, which parks have the most police reports being generated for stuff? And I thought that there might be some park in some communities where for whatever reason, maybe some communities might be more reluctant to report petty theft or minor crime to police. So that's one thing I thought of, is that you could look at the police report sort of lens, but then you might be missing out on certain hot spots and stuff like that.
For sure, and we'll want to be careful that we're not over promising either. So like we want to use crime data or 311 calls and reports, but we know that lighting won't solve all issues. It'll be one tool in the toolbox, and that's where we want to kind of use our safety assessments and work with our colleagues internally to kind of figure out how we can blend that. Yeah.
Once everything is approved, how long will it take for the light to be put in the park?
Yeah, that's always the tricky part, because there's only so much budget to go around each year. So we have a number of like our unit works on park plans and strategies. So there's a number of park plans that are kind of in line to be implemented that would certainly fall within the realm of the park lighting strategy. So you'll see some lighting being rolled out almost immediately because those projects are already started. But it's hard to say, because we may only be able to bring forward a couple of projects a year through our parks capital program. So yeah, it will take some time to kind of roll this out, just based on what things cost. And some parks might be easier than others because there's lighting already. We may just want to enhance. Maybe it's just a sport court enhancement rather than a full length of a kilometer of pathways or something. So some may be easier to roll out within a couple of years than others. Oh, sorry, I see. Oh no, Lama put the questions in the chat. But yeah, if there's anything else that comes to mind, my email is there in the presentation. Feel free to reach out. Happy to chat further. We'll be working on this well into the summer and getting things ready later this fall to package it to regional council. So there's no rush to think of anything right now.
The plan is, I'm assuming, then to submit this to council in the fall, did you say?
So we kind of get the package ready this fall, edited, reviewed, and that kind of thing, but it should be before regional council early in 2024. And then there's always the park budgeting process, which the budget is approved by April, end of April, and so that's the kind of the way we bring projects forward and get money ready and packaged together for kind of implementing projects. So every year you may see these kind of lighting projects being put into the budget, so we can kind of slowly roll things out. And usually that's kind of, it all depends on regional council priorities each year as well. If something else big comes up, or if there's a need to cut back, these are the kind of things that could kind of ebb and flow.
So is there any more questions from the rest of the committee?
I'm fine personally.
Good to hear.
No, everyone asked some very good questions. So no.
Yep, those were excellent questions. Thanks for fitting me into your schedule. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for coming, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So our next order of business. So at the last 3 meetings, the committee has received several presentations from staff on affordable housing initiatives, building standards, and the bylaw M200. So this motion came from committee discussions after receiving these presentations. And in terms of those discussions, we're discussing in terms of making perhaps a pamphlet, either in relation to rental codes or the bylaw M200. In the last few meetings, we were thinking about focusing it more on the bylaw M200, and the whole purpose being that for a lot of the rental policies, that's more of a provincial under provincial purview. So this way, for us, M200 is a municipal bylaw, so that way we felt it was more within our scope. And so the bylaw M200, just as a reminder, is in terms of respecting standards for residential occupancy. So if you're renting an apartment, let's say it's unsafe or there's anything else like maybe fire hazards, that's something that would fall under the bylaw M200. So what I'm going to do now is, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to put forward the following motion. Perfect. So I'll go ahead with the motion. So the motion be that the Youth Advisory Committee recommend.
Sorry, if I may, Chair, it would have to be
Yeah.
one of the committee members who places the motion forward.
No worries.
I can place it forward.
Sure.
Would you be able to actually read the motion, Carter?
Sure. Okay. Do you want me to post it in, or would Carter have access
Yeah,
to it?
can you post it in? Because I wouldn't know exactly what to say.
Yep, I
Is it
will
in
put
the
it in the
agenda?
chat. Yeah, it is in the agenda, but I will drop it in the chat for you.
Yeah, that the Youth Advisory Committee recommend that the Executive Standing Committee that the Youth Advisory Committee recommend that the Executive Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report in consultation with the Youth Advisory Committee to develop a communication strategy on bylaw M200, respecting standards for residential occupancies and other housing related guidelines targeted to youth, first-time renters, and newcomers.
So this will require a mover and a seconder.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Perfect.
Sorry, if I may, Chair. So by Carter reading the motion, they actually moved it. So we would just need a seconder for the motion.
Perfect. So Abraham, would you be okay still going from mover to seconder?
Yes.
Perfect. So now we can have some discussion on the motion itself. Is there any comments anyone or queries anyone would like to make before we go for a vote? Perfect. So if there's no further discussion, then I will call for the question. All those in favor say aye or raise hands. Perfect. All those who oppose. Wonderful, and the motion carries. And a little bit, I think this warrants a little bit of applause. It's actually the committee's first motion that we have passed. So this is definitely very exciting times. And I think I'm sure and I'm sure we're all looking forward to see what comes of it and the next steps. So we deleted that. And there were no added items, correct?
No, Chair, there are no added items.
Perfect. Do we want to have any discussion, Lama, should we have any discussion on the meetings, on the presentations we had today? Or should we leave that for another?
If you folks feel like you would benefit from a discussion, you can definitely go ahead and have that.
Sure, maybe just because we still have some time left, so I might as well see if we can get this stuff going. So I thought we'll start with the mobile youth team. That was actually very interesting because I hadn't actually heard of that program before.
Same. I didn't even know that the fact that they went to CPA to help them, especially with the situation that happened. That was really good. I feel like with that, there should be more places because if I hear, well, she said that they're looking at Spry for Youth, and I feel like there should be more centers being made for youth specifically.
That sounds like a really good motion to get Executive Council to request myself to write a report to the Youth Advisory Committee on what the plan with the multi-service centers are.
Actually, I have something maybe a little negative to say about it, because I kind of thought, isn't that what like the guidance counselors are at school? Because like on one side, the guidance counselors are like, what courses would you take? But other than that, like it's like dealing with, you know, crises that happened and talking to youth that need it. And then there's other services out there for youth that maybe need more support than guidance counselors offer. They would need it for a longer time, not just like 2 days. Like they would have to, you know, essentially like see a therapist. Like it would be a longer duration than what they can provide.
Yeah, that's a good point, Carter. I'll just let you know though, the whole purpose of the CPA piece was if youth or anybody in general is given support after any sort of trauma that fast, the impact of trauma throughout their life is less. So there's only so many guidance counselors and only so many folks that could go into CPA, and so to have the extra resources are preventing the trauma from impacting their life down the road. What you're saying is definitely the long-term approach, but it was kind of a band-aid approach in that situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense to have like the added resources. Yeah.
I think the mobile youth support team, didn't they also say that they have the resources to refer, youth to, to other services? So I think that could maybe help cover in terms of those like long-term, support networks that are needed. One thing I was thinking about is that it could be nice. I remember at the breakfast brunch with the mayor that there was some students from Island View who were saying that they had like mental health wellness days. I thought that could be something that was interesting is like if that, the mobile youth support team, if they could go to schools during the school year, if they do have, mental health days, and just even if it's to make the students aware that, those services exist, I think that could be something helpful in terms of, increasing outreach of the program.
Yeah, and part of Becky's role, like she said, this is a new program and there's only 2 staff for the entire HRM. And the funding really is supposed to be supporting youth involved or at risk of gun and gang violence. And so it's kind of one of those things where we're trying to keep the scope narrow, but it's easy to widen it. And so I think going to the schools and stuff like that will eventually happen down the road. But yeah, they just started in January. So I think there's still a lot of people don't know about what they're doing and who they are.
Any last comments on the mobile youth support team? Perfect. So the park letting strategy. That was actually found that interesting because it's something where I was literally just like walking downtown a few nights ago, and it was something I noticed that there wasn't much lighting in sort of the parks that I was walking in, and it's something where I'd actually be curious to read the research on that and seeing like how much of a difference lighting actually makes in terms of crimes. The way that Stephen explained it makes sense in that if you're increasing traffic, then it would make sense for it to reduce crime. But I just thought that was a little interesting presentation.
Yeah, same with me because there are times I go to parks, especially in the night, and I kind of don't feel safe because I can't really see. And for there to be increase in lighting is really good because as a person, for me, I feel more safe when there's light around because I can actually see where I'm going or who I'm talking to or what is around me, unlike if there's any at all.
Yeah, I really liked the presentation as well, but I liked the fact that when you asked about the where exactly would the lighting strategy be based around? Because I feel like a lot of the lighting will be put in communities that are more downtown, and maybe places that are further out wouldn't benefit as much, as well as also, I guess, the environmental impact it would have. I think that was a good question, because I feel like if if they're doing solar panel powered lights, I think that's a better option rather than like continuously working on natural gas and just making the environmental pollution a bit worse. But I guess, like he said, it's going to cost a lot more if you want to make it more sustainable.
I was surprised how expensive they were. I didn't know it would cost. I think he said what, 250,000 for like, you know, one pathway essentially. Like that's crazy expensive. So I'm just curious, especially in the first few years of the program, as Crystal said, I could see from their point of view them trying to put more in the downtown area just because of the higher density. But then I think you run the risk almost of then underserving other, you know, either like suburban or more rural communities in the HRM area. But
I agree, especially like people have different uses for the lights. So just because less people are using them in the rural areas doesn't mean that the use that they're using them for is less important.
yeah, I think that's any other last comments on that? Perfect. So if that's everything, actually, would anyone like to say anything before we adjourn? Perfect. So we're going to move to adjourn. So this will require a mover only.
I'll move.
Perfect. Thank you, Crystal, for moving that. And this meeting is adjourned as of 6:03 p.m. Perfect.